and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation and of course a little bit of entertainment. This week I am in the Costa del Sol with my mum and sister, enjoying some warm sunny weather and the chance to swim and run in the sun, with just a little bit of chilling and adventure thrown in for good measure. It's great to be able to get away for a few days again before the winter weather kicks in at home, and it feels like forever since we could go abroad on holidays together. Congratulations to everyone who was racing last weekend. Lots of people fulfilled bucket list goals running marathons in Galway, London and Belfast, and there was a big Irish and UK contingent in Barcelona who embraced some less than ideal swim conditions on race morning for their 70.3 and Ironman races. I was delighted to be on the mic at Run Galway Bay 10k, half marathon and marathon on Saturday morning. After falling victim to COVID in 2020, it was great to see so many people participating across the three events on the day. Now, everyone knows that going out to run a race at any level is difficult. Enjoyable mostly, but at times there are sections where you just want to give up and question what you are doing halfway through and what excuse you can cite for giving up. What struck me on Saturday was how grateful and happy people were as they hung around and chatted pre and post race, and certainly in the starting area, the nervous energy was speckled with a sense of excitement that a real running event was taking place, and no matter what the outcome of their individual performance, people were just happy to be back racing and participating in an event. There was no way anyone was going to let their head tell their legs that they were giving up halfway through the race, regardless of distance. This race was making up for lost time and events missed during the pandemic. It felt great to be back. If you fancy running in Galway soon, the Streets of Galway 8k takes place on October 24th, slightly later than its usual early August date, but after missing out on the 2020 edition, it's great to see the event go ahead this year. I've signed up for the Fields of Athenry 10k. I need a goal to aim for over the next few months to keep me running, and having it the day after Christmas will keep the amount of Baileys consumed on Christmas Day to a minimum. Well, maybe not a minimum, but definitely less than if I wasn't running the next day. You can find out more about both events and register to race on trytalkingsport.com. In the meantime, I'm crewing for Karen Cassidy, one of our Galway babes, at the 24-hour Mondello cycling event on the 16th and 17th of October. It will be very strange to be on the other side of the team for this event, but looking forward to seeing how her race unfolds. Having trained with her a lot over the past few months and seeing her commitment and dedication to this ultra cycling challenge, I know she will do well and will give it all she has got. I undoubtedly will have serious FOMO as she whizzes around the track on her bike and I stand by to watch her race. The following weekend, I am off to a double-header Ironman in Portugal. I'm delighted to be joining Paul Kay on the mic for the weekend and get some more sunshine in the process. If you are racing in Portugal, please get in touch. It would be super to see some familiar faces out there and to call you down the finish line. Closer to home, there's plenty going on behind the scenes here too. Keep an eye out for a brand new e-zine being launched in the next few days. You can subscribe to the e-zine on the website. I won't bombard you with lots of emails, but you will get the inside track on lots of things happening across the sport of triathlon at home and abroad. Now to this week's guest. Ultra endurance cyclist Sean Hernon from Galway has been embracing adventure on two wheels for many years. What started out as a 5-week bikepacking adventure across Africa has led him to many routes and races at home and abroad, with a firm focus on going long, embracing exploration and adventure. Kickstarting his ultracycling career with the Race Around Ireland in 2009, it has been a roller coaster of a ride with many mountains and kilometres climbed to get where he is today in his ultracycling career. Towing the start line of the Race Around Ireland on numerous occasions since his first attempt at the event, he has dealt with the lows of a number of disappointing DNFs and the highs of finishing on the podium in both the full and ultra distance events. With both a second and third place in both the races, full and ultra, at Race Around Ireland, he has his target set to make it to the top step of the podium in the ultra race in 2022, after what might be considered a breakthrough season this year. Crippled with stomach issues and a knee that gives him plenty of bother whilst racing that have both in turn affected his performances over the years, he has, through the intervention and guidance of performance nutritionist Gillian Mooney, found some relief for his stomach issues that has seen him perform at the level this season that he knew he was capable of. This summer, Sean won the Donegal Atlantic Ultra Way 555k unsupported race and the TJB Coastal 330-mile race before going on to set a new record for the 571-kilometre route from Mizenhead to Mallinhead in a time of 17 hours and 20 minutes. That's an average of 33 kilometres per hour over the distance, which included around 4,500 metres of climbing. With his eyes on the prize of the top step on the podium in the race around Ireland Ultra in 2022, a possible faster record attempt for that Mizzen to Malin route, and the expected arrival of a new addition to the Hernon household early next year, there are exciting things to come for the man referred to fondly as the Bear Hernon. Enjoy the show. Sean, thank you for joining me on the podcast this evening. Welcome to Try Talking Sport.
Thanks, Joanne, and good to be chatting to you.
Now, we had a chat just a little while ago during Bike Week, but you were in a car on the way to Mizenhead to try and do what?
Yeah, I was on the way to Mizzen. The next morning, I was going to attempt the Mizenhead to Malinhead point-to-point beat the record time, which was previously 17 hours, 36 minutes. And I'm pleased to say that, we did get down that night. We did nearly go off the road at one point and we had to pull the car back on the road, but the bikes were fine. And we started at 5 a.m. the next morning. And I managed in the end. It was a successful day. We knocked 16 minutes off the previous record. So it took 17 hours, 20 minutes in total. And I understand the record will be kind of published, I suppose, in the next few days. Yeah.
For my listeners who are not based in Ireland and don't have a clue where Mizenhead is or Malinhead is, even though they probably do know where it is, tell me exactly where they are and what the distance is that you covered in the 17 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So it's going from the most southerly point in Ireland to the most northerly point of Ireland. It's probably people in the UK or otherwise, it's probably the equivalent of Land's End to John O'Groats in the UK. So the distance from Mizenhead to Malinhead in Ireland, from the south to the north, is 500. Well, it took me 571 kilometers and about 4,500 meters of climbing. Probably averaged 33 kilometers an hour for the 17 hours, 20 minutes.
And who held the record before you and how long did they hold it for?
It's actually a friend of mine who I've raced against, a lovely guy from Cork, Donnacha Cuttress. He held the record previously, and he had actually held it for just over a year, actually. I'd say there's a good chance he might well come back and do it again. I think he's a real fighter. I think that's what I like about him. He's a strong cyclist, and I know there's a few other people I've heard that are going to have a shot at the record maybe next year. So and I might be one of them myself, actually, because I think I can go a bit faster, but we'll see.
And how does your wife feel about you going back out on the bike to try and break another record, take a few more minutes off that record? Yeah,
well, she was delighted that we kind of broke the record, and then she probably wasn't very delighted when the lady from the B&B in Mizenhead rang her the next day and said that I'd left my wedding ring in the bed and breakfast. And then she probably wasn't delighted either when I came home and told her that I'd like to do it again the following week and to try and knock more time off. So to save the marriage, I've decided, no, it's good to leave it now till next summer. But no, she on the whole, she was delighted. She's very, she puts up with my kind of cycling exploits, and she's very understanding. Yeah.
I know we kind of jumped right in there to a little bit about your most recent activities, but for listeners who don't know who you are, and listeners come from all around the world, so some of them will know who you are from your ultra endurance cycling endeavours, and others won't know who you are. Give us a little background into where this passion for cycling came from. How did you get into cycling, and what is it that you love about the ultra aspect of it so much?
I suppose I grew up in the west of Ireland. I was born my parents are from the west of Ireland. I was born in the States, moved back to Ireland when I was 4, and I was lucky enough to grow up in Lettermore. It's like probably 30 miles west of Galway city. It's kind of a little island off the coast. And I guess, I always loved the countryside, and I was very active when I was young, and I had a bike and stuff. So there was always a love, I suppose, with the outdoors. And then when I'd be playing kind of Gaelic football and all that stuff, I probably injured my right foot. I had surgery on it when I was 18, and that sort of kind of not much happened, I suppose, for a few years after that. And it was probably, I suppose, in terms of entry into like ultra events, that probably kicked off in the 2000s. So I moved to London in about 2002, and I was qualifying as a lawyer there. Funny enough, I still remember the time. What got me into cycling was I came home for a trip from London and Shannon Airport, and I saw the Lance Armstrong book. And I know he's done some bad things, but he was the reason that kind of inspired me. Now, he didn't inspire me to go cycling necessarily. I got into running actually on the back of that book. I was training for kind of, I seemed to have right away an appetite for ultras. I don't know why, but like the first running event I was training for there was like a marathon in the desert in Africa. and that sort of thing will come across probably with me. It's just a bit of kind of all or nothing. I don't know. I don't like, I said, why start with the 5K? I just kind of would go for the long stuff. But anyways, no, I probably that was one of the mistakes that I made throughout my career, was that I probably did a bit too much too soon. And I remember injuring my foot when I was running. That kind of, I was looking for something else I could do, and I took up cycling. And I think just after qualifying in London in the probably mid 2000s, I had 5 weeks free, and before going back to work, I remember going down to a bike shop, buying a bike, touring bike. Then I went to the camping shop and I bought a tent and panniers and 3 maps to get around Africa. And I flew out 2 days later, I think. And I did this cycling tour on my own, kind of just through parts of, I think it was Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, West Tanzania, Malawi, Tanzania, and I was completely clueless, I would say, but I had like the best time ever. And I think of all things, that's really like that was the driver for like doing long distance, because it was totally, I suppose, off the beaten track. There was no like tourist points really, but it was, I guess I met some great people. The scenery was fantastic. And then I remember coming back from that, and at that point, I was just, this cycling long distance is brilliant, you know? And then I suppose I saw an advert when I came back then for an ultra cycling event called Race Around Ireland. And that's what I remember start training for that. And I was completely clueless again. I mean, I remember turned up to that start line in 2009. I had probably the race organizers probably remember this still. I had like a little, I don't know, kind of equivalent Peugeot 205 or something. And the back of it was like filled up with fig rolls and pineapple cake, and my mum had made potato salad and all this stuff, and it happened to be really hot. And then like 2 days later, this potato salad was still being fed to me by the crew, which was probably gone off, you know. I remember we were stopping up to the north to get fries, and anyway, so look, I guess I approached the whole thing with ultra cycling it wasn't scientifically done, and it wasn't done, it's not how I'd recommend it to others, but I guess what there was really behind it was just a real love of kind of adventure, I think, and then, you know, exploring like kind of parts of Ireland. The thought of like cycling around the whole of Ireland was just something that seemed brilliant to me. So that was really the start of it, and from there I just ended up doing kind of more and more kind of cycling and running kind of ultra events from there. Yeah.
I want to come back to the trip to Africa. How did you even take a notion that you would go to Africa as opposed to anywhere else? Like, why didn't you just cycle around Ireland?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, but I guess when I was young, I always wanted to travel. Like I really, I always had it that I'd be traveling around the world and stuff. So just any chance to go and kind of off the beaten track, and I guess later on, actually, when I got older, now I'm really keen to explore all the parts of Ireland. But when I was young, it was really about, you know, seeing other parts of the world. But yeah, there wasn't any rhyme or reason of the countries other than just, I think I looked at where flights were available and worked from there.
And what was the highlight of the trip?
The people, I have to say, it was just absolutely amazing. Like I remember there were some parts that I think some people, I'm not sure if they've saw white people before, like out in the wild, because there was, I remember there's two young lads cycling towards me one day, and they literally fell off their bike because, and they just were in total shock, I think, to see this white person coming towards them on a bike, you know, and they were all, I guess, what was funny is that they just couldn't get their heads around like why someone would be on a bike from the Western world coming to Africa, you know. But it was definitely, look, the people and was the best thing. And then I guess the kind of the love of cycling really that triggered from that trip, yeah.
Race Around Ireland 2009, potato salad and fig rolls. How did the race go?
So back then you had 120 hours to do it. It's now kind of the 132. I think even the organisers back then underestimated how tough it is to complete that event. So I got as far as probably the Wicklow Mountains, and I think we're at like 118 hours. And I didn't expect it would take that long, because I remember we had a flight booked back to London the next morning, and we got to somewhere around Wicklow Mountains, I think, not too far from the finish, but we didn't. We were outside the time limit, so it was going to be a DNF, and then we were weighing up. So it didn't work out. I didn't finish that year. Got close, which is amazing given the stuff I was eating and our approach to it, frankly. But I think there was only actually, I don't know, was it 12 or 13 started, but I think there was only 3 finished that year, actually. And So I came back the following year, and I think I worked with a coach actually. So I got very scientific the next year, and no pineapple cake, no fig rolls, no stopping for a fry. And I came third, I think, that year. Subsequent years, I came back, and I suppose the best I've done is probably third in the second in the full, and I've done the half version, which is third in the second. So I guess for me, it's the one. I'm hoping it goes ahead next year to go one better. We'll see.
And will you do the ultra or will you do the full in the RAI?
Yeah, the ultra is the one. I don't think I'll do the full for another few years, just I suppose for family reasons now with the little ones. But the ultra, I suppose I'm definitely keen on doing that one because I started out doing the really long ones. I've started doing, it seems, shorter and shorter, and I think I'm becoming maybe a stronger cyclist as I'm doing possibly the shorter ones. So I guess with the ultra you can be done in like 40 to 48 hours maybe, but which is just completely different ball game from doing the full one, which may take 5 days. And I don't think I'd get the permission at this point to get the 5 days off.
And I love the way you say it takes 40 to say 45, 48 hours. And I'm just looking at you going, God, yeah. 40 to 48 hours is like how many days? And you're just dropping it in there like it's a going out and going for a little run around the park, like a 5K.
Yeah, I guess it's all relative, but yeah, it's, I guess the ultras, what's interesting about them is that, I think you can do all the training, but you don't really know what's going to happen like out in the road, and like as in something's going to happen and you're going to have problems. And I like that bit about it because over 40, 48 hours, whatever, or 5 days, you're going to have, I suppose, the mental the obstacles will hit you and your tummy or different stuff or your knee. And it kind of, I guess I like that bit. You test yourself every year, I guess, in that sense of how you overcome adversity. And I guess that's one of the things about ultras that, people maybe don't understand until you're doing it. It's that sort of, when you overcome some of that adversity, like it carries through into other parts of your life as well. And I think it's a positive thing, I suppose. But yeah, I totally get it. It sounds bonkers, like, to say you're going off for 48 hours. Yeah.
Never mind the 48 hours. I'm thinking of the 5 days.
Yeah. Even that sounds bonkers to me now.
It's one thing for like when we did the race around Ireland, it was 80, I can't even remember what it was 81 hours or something. But there was 4 of us and we were breaking it down in a relay. But like you were doing that many hours or 120 or 130 hours and you're barely stopping. It's just you in the saddle. It's, at least with us, we all get to take a bit of a break. It just does seem pretty crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does sound crazy. And, why do people do it? I mean, I guess, as I said, there's a few reasons for it, but I suppose one of the things is, you don't, first off, I suppose you're not going to go at the intensity maybe of the people doing teams. It's a more, aerobic throughout probably, which I guess makes it a little bit more enjoyable. It's a very different kind of like mentally, you would be fried if you just high intensity kind of, throughout for that period of time. But
well, you probably wouldn't last though. I mean, you wouldn't if you were in the red.
No, I don't think so.
From the get-go, you wouldn't last.
No, exactly. And there's an art form to that as well. Like, I mean, just obviously you kind of have, in terms of digestive issues and stuff, you have to kind of slow it down a bit unless you're like an expert maybe, but to allow the gastric kind of issues to kind of resolve and all this stuff. So I guess as you go a little bit more aerobic, you do enjoy it. It becomes a little bit like, a bit like the Sunday club spin, but without maybe your teammates around. But it's, I guess, yeah, I suppose, look, I'm trying to think what's so great about it. It is, you see all these places that are just like, there's something epic about, cycling through the night and it's just been so quiet and nothing but like the lights of your car behind you. And then you kind of, the beauty that you can see at like, as the sun comes up the following morning. I mean, it's just, there's something rare and just very wonderful about it. It's hard to put into words, I suppose, but like it's something you kind of experience, I suppose. And it's very strange as well because you at times you will, I suppose it's saying all things shall pass, and that really is true for like the ultras, because you can feel terrible at one point and then like within a few hours you can feel like you're on top of the world, you know. So it's just about sticking in there. But it's I suppose Ireland is a beautiful place, like to cycle. That definitely helps, you know.
There is something very spiritual about that whole cycling through the night and then just seeing the sunrise, and you're pedaling away and you're in a world of pain, but it doesn't really matter. There's something very I'm going to say spiritual, but it's not the word I want to use. I don't know how to describe it, but it is something very unique that you don't get in an awful lot of things that you do.
No, 100%. It's definitely something. It's an experience. Yeah, 100%. And I agree. It's hard to define it, I suppose, what that is. It's something you definitely, that gets experienced. But yeah, certainly those are the moments that kind of stick with you, you know, and it's what kind of drags people back, you know, whether you end up winning or finishing, you know, there's something about it that draws a lot of people back, you know. I mean, there's been plenty of years where I've had DNFs because in the ultras you just have to accept that there's a high risk that, you know, you won't finish. But even if you're feeling great beforehand, but there's something, you still have magic moments, you know, before that. Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to describe it, the magic moments. You mentioned dealing with disappointments. How do you come back from disappointments? Like what do you do to forget about the mistakes that you've made, or maybe forget about a bad performance, or what to you is a bad performance? Is a DNF a bad performance?
Well, I suppose, yeah, it depends, I suppose. I mean, I think it's all about, you know, I suppose you try not to forget your mistakes, I suppose. You actually, as long as you're learning from them, I suppose that's the key thing. And by, you know, I was lucky enough, I suppose. I worked with sports psychologists a few years back when I was in London, and I guess the one thing that stuck with me is he said that, you know, acceptance is the master skill, and, you know, you have to accept that maybe things went wrong, and you have to accept, you know, where things have gone wrong, what you could have done better, maybe, you know, need to do next time. But I guess, yeah, well, first of all, it's like if you accept that it didn't go the way you planned, and then you come, typically, I suppose, what I find anyway, certainly, is that if things don't work out, it does give me a drive to come back a bit stronger. I mean, it's, of course, you're going to be disappointed for a period, but it adds as kind of extra fire and motivation. I think you probably understand that as well. It's from my side, I've definitely had low points, and I think that thing definitely with ultras, you can do it. There's not that many of them you'll do per season, so you know, you could end up in a situation where all your eggs in the one basket for, you know, one race a year and a 5-day event or something, and then it doesn't go to plan, and you're kind of that can feel difficult. But look, at the end of the day, it's also maybe the same person, sports psychologist I worked with, like he was very clear, and it's great advice I got. It was just that, like, you know, cycling is cycling. At the end of, whether it succeeds or not in cycling, you're still Sean, and you have to be happy with Sean in day-to-day affairs. And I really kind of think that stuck with me, and it's something that, you know, I guess I don't do cycling because, you know, to fill a gap, I guess. And yeah, I guess but there have been certainly this disappointment, and I guess everyone is different, but being positive and just, I suppose, analyzing mistakes and moving on from there. I think that's all you can do at times. And
yeah, I think Joe Barr coins a phrase. I'm not sure if it's his phrase or if it's a phrase that somebody else has said, but there's a lot to be said about failing forward so that you learn from those mistakes. I know he had that Wild Atlantic Way record attempt, and it didn't go the way he wanted in the first instance. So he talked a lot afterwards about failing forward and about the lessons that he learned, and he could then put those lessons into practice for his successful second attempt that he did just a while ago. And mentioning Joe Barr, you did have a great season this year so far. Aside from your record, I mean, you won the Joe Barr Coast to Coast race. You also won the unsupported Donegal 555. What else did you do this year? Did you win any other races?
No, I think that was it. I was doing some kind of club racing, I suppose, with the league locally, but that was my first, believe it or not, that was my first time sort of club or group racing, actually. So because I was always doing the ultra stuff where you can't draft and so on. So I did, you know, did well in a few of those shorter ones. But No, I think it was the three ultras this year were the three, the Mizzen Malin records, the Donegal 555 unsupported, and the Joe Bar 770 coast to coast. They were the three. I'm trying to think actually.
Yeah, but while you're thinking about that, come back to me about the club racing. Normally people go the other way. They do the club racing first and then they step up to the longer distance stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is it. See, I started out with the really long distance. Like my first ever race of any ever distance was the 2,200 kilometer race around Ireland. And then over the years, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, I've kind of started doing the race around Ireland Ultra, and then I've just been moving to the shorter events. And then this year, I got into the club league, I suppose, organised by the Challenge Cycling Club in Galway. They run a fantastic league. I think I kind of got into it kind of halfway through or something, but they're completely different to ultras because it's like 20, 30 kilometers. And I had zero tactics for me in terms of racing. I mean, I just jump in off the front at some first few times and think I can just pedal away. Didn't want to, because I'm so not used to cycling in a group. I prefer to be out front, but those tactics aren't gonna be when you race.
Swallowed up.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, I really I think that definitely helped, and because I was doing that leading into things like the Joe Bar and stuff, and I think it helps. It helped me, I think, anyway, certainly become a little bit more, I suppose, savvy and a bit more maybe aggressive in terms of that racing mindset, as opposed to kind of a maybe just like an ultra. Because I think with an ultra, it's very, you look at the distance and you can just go out maybe a bit slow. And in the past, I would have been, I suppose, less aggressive. I think I would have started events and then moved up slowly. Whereas now my approach for the 3 races this year is just go off hard from the gun, and you kind of try and take the lead as quick as you can and just stay out there. And I think the racing, certainly helped a little bit on that. I really enjoyed it, I have to say, and I'll definitely go back to it next season.
And how did you find doing the Donegal 555 unsupported? So the Joe Bar and Mizzen to Malin, you had a crew with you. Race Around Ireland, you have to have a crew with you as well. But the unsupported side of things, it's very, very different. So how did you find jumping across from having the crew to cater to your every need, give you the fig rolls and the pineapple cake or whatever it is that you're having now, versus needing to have all the logistics and plans and know what you're doing, where you're going, or maybe you didn't, maybe you cycled by the seat of your pants, basically. I was going to say flew by the seat of your pants, but pedaled by the seat of your pants. How did you find that switch over?
I loved it, I have to say. I really, really loved it. It's different, but I guess it felt for me a bit going back to the kind of roots of this whole thing of it's always for me, it's is there adventure to be found in this, and is there kind of a new kind of scenery and stuff so for me it was the 555 I hadn't done before, and I mean it was absolutely stunning course. I'm hoping I can go back to it maybe to do the supported one next August. It was different, I suppose, because you always have in the back of the mind, you have your bike set up, and the biggest fear you have is what happens if you have a serious mechanical or puncture? Now, luckily I didn't on the day, nothing serious. Few kind of issues, just tightening up bolts and things. And I had an issue actually with my bike light, where the bracket came loose, and for the last, 100k, you're kind of having to hold it in your hand while pedaling, and that made life difficult, to say the least, because that was all in the dark. And coming down Glengesh, I think that's it. It was a bit scary, I have to be honest. But I think the other bit is look, I'm not the best historically at being, I wouldn't say, is it organised or planning for these things, right? So I'm better now, but it used to be a bit chaotic. But I think you have to be organised for the self-supported one, right? So I think I did do quite well, and I definitely kept it minimal in terms of what I was carrying on the day, but I was kind of clever enough of how you store things on the bike and in your backpack. But the biggest thing is probably access to water, which required stopping at a few places and going into shops. Other than that, it's not. It is long, but it's 20 hours or so, and I didn't have any big mechanicals, and it's I highly recommend it. I mean, anyone, I think it's going to become more popular, but for anyone who hasn't any interest at all, I mean, it's just it's wonderful. You are still seeing all the teams go by you during the day and stuff like that, so there is this kind of, even though they're not your team, you're kind of waving at people, and everyone's really friendly and all that stuff. So I definitely, I'm curious. I think for next year, I to have a shot at the kind of the supported version of the 555, but I definitely someday as well go back to the unsupported.
And there's also the transatlantic way race, 2,000 kilometers as well. I think it was at 1,800 kilometers of unsupported riding from the top of the country down to the bottom. So that's another one for the books for you to try out.
100%, yeah.
In ultra racing, I know in the record attempt we were chatting before we came on air, and you said that the only time you stopped pedaling was when you were stuck at traffic lights or stuck at a traffic jam. So for 17 hours and 20 minutes, you pretty much kept the pedals turning. How?
Yeah. I don't know, but I suppose it was. I guess it helped. I knew I had to beat a certain time, and I always had in the back of my mind that this fear that you're gonna get stuck at this red light, or you're gonna have a mechanic, and you're gonna lose time. So 17 hours 20 minutes was the total time, and I think 4 minutes 45 seconds was the non-moving time, which was just the traffic light time. So yeah, I didn't get off the bike. It felt fine. I guess. I mean, it's I was a bit sore after, but I mean, on the day it was fine. It wasn't. It sounds like you need to get off the bike more, but it was actually on the day it wasn't an issue at all. And I guess the way it works is you have someone from Cycling Ireland there as a kind of the commissaire keeping an eye on you, so they're driving behind you the whole day to make sure you're not breaking any rules, and making sure that there's a crew car as well. So they had to, you're not permitted to make any handoffs from the vehicle, so they would have to be on the side of the road. And so once every hour they would do a kind of, as you're coming past, you would grab a bottle of water and a nutrition piece off them, and or your kind of rain jacket, whatever. So it just, I think it sounds long, but it's also, for other events, it moved by pretty quickly, and the adrenaline flows as you move from kind of village to village, as you're kind of getting to the finish. So it was a good day overall. And
what kind of food were you eating? Was there any potato salad?
No, no potato salad. So I actually, so that's an interesting point. So I had, this was the first probably ultra event that I didn't have stomach problems. I think things like Race Around Ireland and other events, I like, one of the reasons I've unfinished business, I've always had kind of stomach issues or something, either knee problem or stomach issue. And after the Joe Barr event, I had a few stomach issues, the 770, but I spoke to Gillian Mooney, Joe Barr's partner, who is a nutritionist, and she was brilliant. Ultimately, what we did, we just dialed back. She said it was trying to take in too many carbs per hour, and that was what was causing the kind of the gastric upset. And so the Mizzen to Malin one was, pleased to say, it was the first day. We at one or two times I felt like I had maybe a little bit less energy, because particularly in the start when I was pushing quite hard, but it was amazing to me to go a full day and not have that sort of time lost through kind of bloated feeling and just the kind of feeling horrible where you kind of don't want to keep moving when your stomach's at you. Yeah. So I guess that helped. So in terms of what I was eating, it was a mixture of carbohydrate kind of gels, and then there was I suppose what you might call real food. There was kind of sandwiches, and there were I suppose the hydration was probably about 700 mils, probably average about 600 mils an hour. Occasionally as well, every 4 hours, there was things like kind of, brioche buns and chocolate bars. That was the first time for me eating chocolate bars, but she said it was okay. So there you go. The best thing was she kind of introduced variety. So that definitely helped. Yeah.
So what had you been doing in the past, Sean, that was causing all the stomach upset?
I think it was the volume of carbohydrates. There's a lot of research and data, that people can take up to like sort of 90 grams of carbs an hour, but like that requires a lot of training and stuff to get to that level. And when I did the Joe Barr coast to coast, I guess, I was taking in maybe 65 grams of carbs an hour, and I was feeling pretty strong. But for the Mizzen Malin, we dropped that to kind of closer to around 40 grams. Which doesn't sound like an awful lot actually, and yet it provided a pretty consistent energy throughout the day. So really, the mistakes before was just it was the volume of carbohydrates really that was just the stomach wasn't able to kind of process it as much. Yeah.
And when we look at sleep for the longer events, maybe I know you say 17 hours isn't very long, and I guess an Ironman is there or thereabouts as well, or you'll have 1 day or 2 day endurance events or 24-hour events, and they're kind of doable. But on the longer distance events like the Race Around Ireland or some of those bigger events, how do you manage your sleep and fatigue on the bike?
It's tricky, I suppose, the short answer, because if you're doing an event over 48 hours, you probably do need to sleep. Like I've done events up to 48 hours and not slept, and it's doable, I suppose. But like things like sort of the Race Around Ireland 5 day full, like you definitely have to sleep, and it becomes a question is like, do you stop regularly or not? You know, there's people who have done it in, let's say, probably 2 or 3 hours over 5 days. It's not something, I suppose, I did when I started out back 2009-10. Like I was in the UK, and I used to do things. I thought I could train myself to be sleep deprived, so I used to do things like Friday evening I'd finish up work in London, cycle down to Dover, get the ferry at night, and cycle across northern France, and then come back Saturday night and go out to the nightclub or something. And then I thought this was all going to be like, you know, this is going to be great sleep deprivation, but you know, it doesn't actually do anything really. So I don't do anything. I don't do any sleep deprivation training now, I guess, and I haven't done for many years. So I think it's a tricky one. So it's really, I guess there's telltale signs during a race when you have to go down, because you do get a sleep. There is a lot of science around it, but like there are moments where you have a sleep window, and you have to go down very quickly in that window, I suppose, when your body is kind of entering into a REM state, I suppose, and you are starting to see things, very hallucinations and stuff. I've definitely had some strange hallucinations over the years. We'll
come back to that in a minute. Yeah. Here's some stories. But in terms of managing the sleep, then, would you plan to have, like, say, a 15-minute nap or a 10-minute nap? Or are you going to say, right, we're going to try and sleep for an hour? Or how do you manage it?
The last few events I've done, it's not something we've planned out in advance to say we're going to take a 10-15-minute break at this time. It's because it's just impossible, because if your body is not ready to sleep, it's wasted. And I find the first 48 hours of any event, you are exhausted, but the adrenaline is somehow, still kind of going through your body, and I find it hard to switch off. So what's worked for me, I suppose, is like you reach a point where you're very tired. Typically it's on like day 2 or so, and I try and do it that I'd sleep at like 3 or 4 a.m. so that you're waking up just as the sky's getting bright, and you trick your brain into thinking you've slept the night, But no, I would never sleep more than, I'd probably do like 30 minutes. I wouldn't do like an hour and a half or anything like that. I know some people do, but I think the shortest I've done going Race Around Ireland is probably like 2 hours across 5 days or something. But other events, because it's all time you're losing, I suppose, on your competitor. So that's the thing in the back of your mind. You're kind of like, what is the minimum dose you can get away with? And sometimes 20 minutes is actually perfect. I've had events where there was one year, I think in 2014, I remember clearly, and I was battling with a guy, Mario Fonseca from Portugal, and we were literally, I think, battling I remember we were racing each other coming into Cork and going up Patrick's Hill. Now, probably to an observer, probably we're going at 5 miles an hour, but at that stage, but to us, it felt like we were going at, full on 40 miles an hour. And anyways, we were neck and neck, I suppose, all the way to the finish line. And I remember I was ahead for so long, and then I think 30 miles from the finish or 40 miles from the finish, he went ahead of me. And I just felt broken, and I kind of like the energy. I thought he was pulling away, and he was for a period. But my crew chief said, we need to put Sean down for a sleep. And I went down for, I think, a 10-20 minute sleep. And at that time of the race, like with 30-40 miles to go, you think, well, it's game over. But it transformed me. And I remember like just feeling really buzzing, and my average pace just flew up, and I remember catching him and came second that year. So it really, everyone is different, and it's just, it's hard to say 10 minutes or 20 minutes will work for everyone, but a good crew manager, I suppose, to kind of see when you're at that point where you definitely need it, I suppose. Yeah.
And that you're not falling asleep on the bike as well in the middle of the night. I want to ask you about recovery on the other side. So racing for 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is. So not only have you put your body through all of this pedal power, but you've also had sleep deprivation. So how long typically does it take you to recover, to come out of an event again? I know Jill talks often about how it takes a while to get Joe to come out of that event mode, and it's bringing you out quite slowly from it. The recovery can be quite slow. So what do you do to recover, to get the sleep back in and to get your pattern back into normality?
It takes me a few days, I think, to get the sleep pattern back. And you would think that you're exhausted, but I do find it hard to sleep for a couple of nights after. Like I'll be sleeping, but not, I won't get a full night's sleep, probably like 5 hours, that type of thing. And it's different. I found it different over the years. I don't know what it is, but I think the body maybe has got more used to it. I say that in the sense of, I remember clearly things like 2010. The recovery was horrible from things like the Race Around Ireland full. I remember for a full month, literally, I was waking up and in sweats. The bed would be soaked, and I'd have to change sheets like you could twice a night, and it was. I think that was a year where I probably pushed myself maybe too hard and too far perhaps. But I think that was the body. It took a long period. I guess ever since then, I remember that I wasn't in a mood really for cycling for at least about a month after that event. And I always go now on the thing of how quickly after an event am I looking forward to getting out cycling again. So if I'm excited about going cycling like a day or two after the race, then I know I'm in a good kind of mental place, I suppose. So I guess, look, this year was very good for me, and my recovery was probably the fastest it's been in any year. So I think, I was cycling, I think the day after in each of the races I've done, like not long distance, but just able to cycle up and down the road kind of thing, and then gradually doing 30, 40 Ks to stuff. But and I guess that I don't know, and it's not that I'm doing anything different either. I mean, I guess I think it's life is busy outside of cycling, and you don't really have time to think about the race, or you just get on with stuff. But yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not, like, as in, I think it was 10 days between the 770k and the Mizzen Malin. And I think, normally you'd look at that and say that's not really an appropriate window, but the body was okay. And but I'm not doing anything different in terms of nutrition or sleep, so it's a tricky one, I suppose. Like I think next year might be a totally different situation. Yeah.
And what's the go-to meal when you finish a race? When you're not having stomach issues or you're not like completely wrecked, what are you looking forward to most on the finish line, other than sleep?
I'm not usually hungry at the end, to be honest. Yeah, you're kind of, because if what am I looking forward to? That's a good question. I usually just eat what's in the car. If I find probably a chocolate bar, maybe. Yeah, I'm not. It's not like I look forward to a steak and chips or that kind of stuff. But I definitely, I should say, sorry. Yeah, we have. It's become a bit of a tradition for the last few races, like my Apache pizza. So maybe I'll say Apache pizza. Yeah.
Talk to me about the hallucinations. What's the weirdest one you've ever had?
Yeah, probably the weirdest one I've done lots of kind of, I don't know, self-experimentation or things around nutrition and stuff. So I've been things like I've been vegan, I've been fruitarian, I've done different things over the years, right? But there was one, I was vegan for a few years, and I remember doing the Race Around Ireland, and I remember being in Mayo, this started, and because you are over 40 hours in, I think, at this point. We hadn't slept, and I just remember seeing like these every car light that was coming towards me there was the lights of the car. I couldn't make them out properly, but I kept seeing the McDonald's golden arches, and I kept thinking there were like these McDonald's Big Macs and stuff coming at me, and then the crew were kind of starting to get worried why I was sort of moving over to these lights, because I was really craving meat, and then I kept seeing these kind of it was really bizarre. And then I've seen things like, I don't know, green triangles in the sky for like, I'd say 2 days. And I thought they were following me around Ireland. It varies a little bit. There's I suppose as long as you can keep on the right side of the road, you're okay, because you definitely start seeing like some funny kind of stuff. Like you see things like, in the bushes, and you think someone's jumping out of the bushes, that kind of thing. Or you think a post box is like a person that's waiting on the sideline, that kind of thing. It's bizarre, but
and tell me, what hurts the most? Your arse, your legs, your stomach, your head, when you get off the bike after the record 2 weeks ago? What hurt the most?
I think it's the head, yeah, for sure. Like the amount of, I think is it the concentration, or because it's not, you're not spending the time, you're trying not to let your mind drift, and I suppose you're trying to be focused throughout, because once your mind wanders, you're kind of, you're probably going to lose speed and all that stuff. But I find it, yeah, it's the head is the kind of the trickiest bit. You kind of, and the other thing is it doesn't register properly with me. Like with the crew, I always find kind of very happy and delighted, whereas I'm kind of at the finish, whereas I'm sort of, it doesn't quite register with me. I don't know, is it the brain is still too tired or something? It's always the day after that I find is the kind of, it sort of hits you like that you've like accomplished something, that kind of thing. But definitely, yeah, like everything else is like all the other physical pains that clears up, but it's more like the mental exhaustion probably it's hard to define it, but it's just, it feels like your brain is at times is gone into overload maybe, yeah.
And when you're actually cycling and you're cycling for that amount of time, what are you thinking about?
Well, you're trying to just think about looking down the Garmin or what you need to do. Like I like for the Mizzen Malin one, it was, I just kept, I kind of, the pace, I suppose, over the day was dropping a bit. We didn't really have, I think we had a headwind at the we had a tail. We didn't have any headwinds on the day. That's, it'd be pointless to do it with headwinds, but we didn't have any headwinds or crosswinds, but I was hoping for maybe a bit more favorable tailwind. We had a tailwind for the first probably 20k, and then it died away and we didn't get it again until probably the Midlands. But I remember like in the Midlands, you're doing about 40k an hour. And I think the average speed at that time was probably like, I don't know, it could have been 36k an hour or something. Maybe you're at Lone was about the halfway point. And you're just, you try not to think about the 200k or the 500k that's left to go. I kept thinking about the next 50k. It was like, if I can keep this at this average speed of this high, this is going to maximize my buffer for the later on. So it was all about like these 30Ks, the next 30K, trying to do this, the next hour, can I keep this? So that's how I operate, I suppose. And you try not to, like, you're not thinking about like, what's coming up, what are you going to do next week? And what about these random thoughts everyone has thoughts, but you try to not have those thoughts. And just the way maybe you can do that, I find that's why my brain hurts so much, is that you're trying to keep so focused on the kind of the speed and that kind of stuff, and therefore, like, people think you must be like dreaming up all kinds of great ideas and thinking about all affairs of the world, but like it's
dreaming of McDonald's with a side of Apache pizza.
Yeah. You're dreaming maybe of Apache, at the end. So no, it's a pretty narrow range, I suppose, and it's not that exciting either.
It's just, when you're like, is it mindless thoughts? And I suppose, how do you get rid of any negativity that you might have in your head, that like, I'm only in Athlone and I'm only doing 35 or 40k an hour average when I need to be doing an awful lot more? How do you keep those negative thoughts at bay by just staying focused in the moment?
Yeah, it can be tricky. And I suppose, I think that it's important, I consider myself to be a very positive, I suppose, person off the bike and in life in general. And I think a positive outlook, it helps when you're on the bike, because the first thing to realize is you're going to have some problems and something's going to go wrong. And I like for Miz, I think I was a little bit worried. There was a part of me that was worried as to, like, this is 10 days after. Am I going to be? I wasn't feeling the best, I'll be honest. The body was okay, but there was just my stomach and other things that was a little bit strange the days before. So I wasn't sure how I'd hold up on the day. And then we were an hour in, I'd say, an hour and a half, and my right knee felt like it was going to pop. And I was like, oh my God, this is, you could go into kind of dramatic mode, but it was, it's about, I suppose, trying to stay calm and accept that, these things will go wrong. This is one of events, and the more things will happen later that day. And it's tricky, because there's a tendency for the fear to kind of lead, but if you do allow it to kind of dominate, you're gonna lose that focus. I suppose it all comes back to trying to maintain focus. And anyways, but no, look, that did resolve itself. I think there was a lot of climbing in the first bit, and I probably went out a bit too hard. I think that was the reason why the knee, but then it settled down. But it's, I guess, just trying to, again, going back to the thing about accepting things will go wrong, keep moving forward, all things will pass. These kind of, I don't know, mini mantras and stuff it helps me, I suppose. And I think everyone probably has a different approach, but, and then it gives you confidence that, as you improve and you kind of for example, like I find demoralizing is headwinds. You know, if it feels like you're kind of going nowhere. Like, lucky we didn't have it on Miss Malin, or I'd be very disappointed. But that's the thing that kind of is tricky, because you just, it feels like you're not making significant progress. But then I just, you think about it. If you're in a race situation, I just think, like, if it's tough for me, it's tough for the others, and I'm gonna, you try and push harder, or you try and turn things around, I suppose, and that's every situation is a little bit different. But I think the thing that I find that probably the most difficult historically has been the stomach issues, because when the stomach is problematic, it sort of has an impact on everything, and that is where it can be tricky to make the logical decisions, the kind of about being positive and stuff, because you just feel very, very poorly, kind of thing, like, in general. And I think that's where the crew come in. Like, I mean, for these ultras, like, the crew are so important, and I think the crew, I said it to them as well during the Joe Barr 770 coast to coast. It was, I remember, we were probably in the lead, I'd say maybe 90% of the race, but in the final 200k, a guy took the lead, and that could have been very demoralizing. And the crew were just like, kept at me, like, they knew the stomach was poorly, and they were like, look, it's going to come around, just drink this water. And this guy is probably really tired, he had to put in a shift to kind of catch you up. So they were like, just keep going. And this is, again, everything, it worked out. Like, within an hour and a half, it was the stomach had really come back and able to, like, take on food, and then the energies quickly came back, and you're kind of, off you go. So it's every situation is different, but it all comes back to, like, just accepting, first of all, that you're going to have these issues. So there's no getting away from it.
I think when you have a pattern of maybe having something like a stomach issue in a race, it can add to the overall anxiety about that race, never mind the fact that you're going to be on your bike and you're trying to win a race, or you're trying to complete a race or whatever. But when you add in the fact that there's a 90% chance you're going to have an issue with your stomach, that can't be easy either to deal with from a mental perspective, never mind from a physical perspective.
Yeah, I think so. And I really hope I've turned the corner now, with, like, thanks to Jill's help, because it's too many kilometers lost on the road, I'd say, and certainly in my experience from that kind of the stomach. But yeah, you're right. It's sort of, it's always been in the back of the mind, kind of, are you doing, how's this going to go? Because when it becomes a pattern, like, it's almost like it's repeating itself. Whereas it was just brilliant, the Middleman, not to have that thing. It was just, like, if it had happened, I suppose, I think, yeah, it probably would have cost me potentially 2 hours on the day. That's how big an impact. Things like Race Around Ireland, I'd say there's years where it's probably cost me, like, 12 plus hours easily, I think, from not being able to eat anything. Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What are the plans for 2022, other than trying to break your own record for the Mizzen to Malin again, once you've gotten the free pass to go out again?
Yeah, well, look, I think family life is important, and I think, there's work,
Work? What's that?
There's family. Sorry, there's family. Then there's work, and then there's cycling. I think so. That's the order. But I think there's 3 probably events I'd love to do next year, and I think hopefully the Race Around Ireland Ultra is back. I'd love to do that next August, and just love to give that a kind of a proper shot, particularly if the stomach's good. And then I think in early August as well, there's the 555, potentially do that with the crew. And then I've spoken to the commissaire from Cycling Ireland. We've made a few adjustments on the route, and I think he's happy to come. So we may do it next summer when there's more daylight, and fit that in somewhere. But that's subject to family permissions. And I honestly, if I get those 3 next year, I'll be happy. So I'll deal with them next spring. But yeah,
and important to note that you have a small baby that's only 19 months old, and that you are expecting another baby is it January of next year?
Yeah, January. So a few months away. Yeah, we're going to have our second. So that's very exciting. And but it's. I think, yeah, we were chatting before this, I think, about the Swift, and I'm not, any day of the week, I'll go out. Like, even today it was a bit, the weather here wasn't great, but, I go out on the bike, and I think with the little one, I think I might have to look into the indoor Swifting, I think, a bit more, because I'm not sure I'll have the luxury of taking off as much, shall we say.
You'll have to join us on a Monday night spin every Monday, 7:30.
Yeah.
Be there or be square. We're getting nearly to the end of the chat. I want to ask you, what has been the biggest highlight of your sporting career to date?
Probably this season, in terms of just the success, I suppose, in the 3 events and each requiring different preparation, I suppose. And, the Miz and the Malin, I think is probably that was probably my best day on the bike and without stomach problems. So I suppose I have to say that one, yeah.
And have you eyes on Race Across America potentially in the future?
Yeah, not so much actually. I think we're so lucky to have so many great events in Ireland, and I suppose when I started doing ultra cycling, I was over in the US doing races and things like Race Across the West and Race Around Oregon and different ultras and stuff. And I used to think like, oh, you have to go over there and different parts of Europe to get like the great experience. But like, things like the 555, the Race Around Ireland, the Joe Barr like series of races, like these are all. And now there's ones like I think Park Mary has in Mayo as well, the Mayo Wild Ultras. Just were spoiled for choice. So I'd love to do all of them, and I don't see myself in any mood for going to the US in the next 3 years anyways. We'll see after that.
If you were starting out again, Sean, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I'd probably work with a coach maybe at the outset. I think that I don't work with coach for cycling training at the moment necessarily, but I have worked with some, particularly in the middle part of my time cycling. And I think I just think the experience and the cluelessness, I suppose, of myself and the naivety, frankly, of just, I was too impatient, and B, I went around things and just trying to get to places as quickly as possible with no clue really what to do. So taking on board, I think, advice of the experts, I'd say get a coach very, very early if you believe you want to get into like doing ultras or even shorter events. I think that will help, stick with you throughout your career, frankly, like what you can learn from that. It'd probably be a bit more kind of, I try to be a bit more organized. That's the thing that I suppose these ultras have forced upon me over the years is now I'm definitely more organized, but I was terrible at the outset, Has
the requirement for being organized on the bike for your racing impacted your organizational skills for work and home life in a positive way?
I think so, a little bit. I mean, if you ask that to others, they'll probably say no. He's kind of he's maybe not, but I've definitely got better. Yeah, I'm going to say that. So I think things like the Donegal 555 unsupported, things like that, definitely you have to have your ducks in a row. And I think that sort of stuff helps, yeah.
And my final question is, lots of people refer to you as the Bear, and there was a TG Cahir documentary that was done on the Bear, Sean Hernon, but where does the name Bear come from and what is its significance?
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd ask this. So, yeah, no, look, there's nothing too exciting about it, but I've been known as the Bear. Like all my friends, everyone knows me, they generally refer to me as the Bear, and it's been that way for a good few years now. But I think I can't quite remember exactly how it started, but I do know that, and I still do, I suppose, I love the animals, bears. I'm really fond of bears, I suppose, and so I don't know, is it because I liked bears and then I start like calling people Bear or something, but it stuck with me. And I guess then my friends, when they, like the friends I was at university and college and stuff like that, when they things like going into the African cycling and the ultra cycling, they just thought this stuff is crazy, and it's like, this guy's gone wild. So they start calling me that's where the Bear, I think, really kind of.
Was there a particular type of bear, like a grizzly bear, a polar bear, or was it just all bears?
I think it was just like some whatever the craziest bear or wild bears out there, kind of. My friends refer to kind of that I have this thing called bear logic. Like it doesn't make things. I have a way of our mindset about things that doesn't make sense to them. So they think it's an animal behavior. I don't know. You'll have to ask them someday. Yeah.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It was great chatting with you. I can't wait to see what happens for next year. I might see you on the road somewhere.
Yeah, great. Or we might get Swifton, actually. We should do that. But thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget you can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find me across all the platforms: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. Pop by and say hi. Let me know what you think of the show. If you're new to Try Talking Sport, please do check out some of our previous episodes. You will be impressed and inspired by our guests. Until next time, stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.